She noticed an elderly woman striving with her burdens, her thin frame visibly trembling under the weight, and impulsively offered assistance. In return for this simple act of unexpected kindness, the aged woman bestowed upon her a valuable item, a tangible symbol of profound gratitude that would fundamentally alter the perceived course of her life and fill her heart with unprecedented hope. However, the path forward was not to be smooth. Someone she held dear, a person she trusted, subsequently committed a regrettable act born of avarice and deceit, and everything she thought she had gained began to unravel in a distressing cascade of events. Yet, the mystery lingered. Why did the valuable item, so recently acquired, suddenly and inexplicably vanish? Why did the one who took it, the one she had cared for, begin wandering erratically through the thoroughfares, his mind lost in a haze of madness? Settle back and prepare to discover the startling and impactful answers as we delve deeply into this compelling narrative of virtue, temptation, consequence, and unexpected grace. It was a very hot afternoon in a peaceful corner of the settlement, the kind of heat that pressed down from the sky, stealing the air from your lungs. The sun beat down intensely, turning the already dry earth into a thick, swirling dust whenever feet disturbed it. Two companions hurried along the path that wound between modest dwellings and scattered trees. One was Adwoa, a young woman whose face held a natural gentleness, though it was currently shadowed by worry and fatigue. The other was Kofi, a young man whose sharp features and darting eyes suggested a mind constantly at work, full of schemes and calculations. Adwoa's attire was visibly worn, showing the signs of prolonged use and limited means, and her face indeed bore the visible signs of weariness, a deep-seated fatigue that went beyond just the heat of the day. She looked at Kofi, her voice slightly strained by the effort of walking and her underlying anxiety, and inquired, "Are you certain this establishment will offer me employment? My hopes are fragile." Kofi smiled, a quick, confident flash that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Do not fret," he assured her, perhaps a little too readily. "I have a connection with the overseer there. A good one. I shall speak with him personally. You simply need to follow me. Trust my word." Adwoa inclined her head, a small gesture of weary acceptance. Her legs felt heavy and feeble, protesting with every step on the dusty path, but she forced herself to continue walking. She possessed virtually nothing left in her modest abode. Her resources were depleted. Should she fail to secure this position, this slim chance Kofi had presented, she was utterly uncertain of her next step. The prospect was bleak. The path stretching before them seemed extensive under the relentless sun, and the heat made it feel even longer, but they did not halt their progress. Adwoa clung to the slender thread of hope, the possibility of work offering a way out of her desperate situation, and Kofi, for his part, was confident his connection would prove beneficial to her, and perhaps, though he didn't voice it, to himself in some way. As they rounded a bend in the winding path, they perceived an elderly lady proceeding at an exceptionally slow pace ahead of them. Her form was exceedingly thin, suggesting a life of hardship or perhaps advanced age simply taking its toll, and her limbs trembled noticeably with the effort of motion and balance. Upon her crown, she precariously balanced a bulky container of water, its weight a clear burden. The vessel was heavy, undeniably so, causing the elderly woman to repeatedly lean precariously to one side just to maintain her balance, and perspiration streamed in rivulets down her aged countenance, highlighting the immense physical strain she was under. Suddenly, she paused, her movements stiff and painful, and exclaimed in a weary, reedy tone that carried her exhaustion, "Kind young ones passing by, I implore you, if it is not too great a trouble, assist me with this heavy load. My strength is completely depleted." Adwoa instinctively slowed her pace, her gentle face immediately softening with concern, and regarded the woman with empathy. Kofi, however, gave her hand a sharp tug, urging her forward. "Let us go, Adwoa. We are already behind schedule, and time is pressing," he added, his voice impatient. "Should we fail to arrive promptly, the manager will most certainly depart, and your opportunity will be lost." Adwoa looked at the elderly woman again, truly taking in her condition. The woman's legs quivered violently, and it seemed as though she might collapse from exhaustion at any moment. But she is in desperate need of aid. Adwoa stated softly, her voice filled with genuine concern. Kofi looked briefly at the elderly woman and contracted his brow in a frown of annoyance. His voice was cutting, laced with impatience and a lack of understanding. "Mother," he said dismissively, using the respectful address, but emptying it of warmth, "we simply do not have time for this. We are bound for a place of significance, a potential path to betterment. Why undertake such a burdensome task given your advanced years and apparent frailty?" The elderly woman slowly fluttered her eyelids, her gaze distant, showing the depth of her fatigue. She did not utter a word in response. Perhaps she lacked the strength, or perhaps she saw the futility of argument. Her hands, gripping the edges of the container, continued to tremble uncontrollably. Adwoa swiftly turned and looked at Kofi, her eyes wide with astonishment and disbelief at his harshness. "Kofi," she inquired, her voice hushed with shock, "how could you possibly speak in such a cruel manner to her? She is an elderly person in distress. She clearly requires immediate assistance." Kofi crossed his arms defensively and nodded his head in sharp negation, his resolve hardening. "This matter does not concern us, Adwoa, not at all. It is not our problem. Let her pause here or await assistance from another passerby. We have journeyed too far, endured too much heat and dust, to be delayed now by this interruption." Adwoa drew a deep, shaky breath, her heart aching for the woman. Supposing she were to fall right here, she spoke softly, voicing her worst fear. What if this brief moment, this fleeting encounter, is the sole aid she finds today on this path? Kofi averted his gaze, turning slightly away, and spoke nothing further, but his displeasure was evident in the rigid line of his shoulders and the tapping of his foot. He tapped his documents against his leg, a rapid, agitated rhythm, and spat out impatiently, "Should we miss the opportunity with the manager, should you lose this chance because of this delay, the fault will entirely be yours, Adwoa." But Adwoa had already ceased paying attention to him, her focus drawn irrevocably to the struggling woman. An inner prompting, a quiet but insistent voice within her soul, indicated to her that this moment, this simple act of compassion, was of far greater consequence than any potential employment or personal gain. Adwoa proceeded deliberately, her steps now firm with purpose, towards the elderly woman. She stooped down slightly to be closer to the woman's level and offered her a gentle, reassuring smile. "Mother," she addressed her tenderly, her voice soft and comforting, "where's your dwelling located? Where do you need to go? I shall gladly assist you with this burden." The elderly woman regarded her with a look of profound surprise, as if such an offer was the last thing she expected to hear on that hot afternoon. You genuinely intend to help me?" she inquired, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with disbelief. "Indeed, mother. That is precisely my intention. Please, give me the vessel," Adwoa replied, extending her hands, ready to receive the load. Kofi slowly retreated a few steps, his countenance registering a mixture of confusion and annoyance. He observed, unable to intervene, as Adwoa carefully raised the heavy vessel from the woman's crown, studying it for a moment, and then with practiced movement, balanced it upon her own head. The elderly woman gazed at her, her expression changing from surprise to something almost akin to disbelief and wonder. Kofi parted his lips as if to speak, perhaps to protest or demand they leave, but then he sealed them tightly, seemingly unsure of what to say or do in the face of Adwoa's unexpected action. He scanned the surroundings, looking left and right, clearly uncertain of his course of action now that his companion had deviated so completely from their plan. Adwoa, ignoring Kofi's internal conflict, turned her full attention to the elderly woman. "Mother, please show me the path we must follow," she said with a simple, encouraging smile. As they began moving slowly away from Kofi, a peculiar occurrence transpired in the sky above them. The sun, which had been so intensely bright and oppressive just moments ago, commenced to recede noticeably behind a gathering cover of clouds, offering a sudden, unexpected relief from the heat. Kofi looked upwards, his gaze fixed on the changing sky, and sensed a feeling within his chest, a strange stirring he couldn't quite name. It was not resentment towards Adwoa, not exactly, but something different, something deeper. It was a premonition, vague yet unsettling, that something significant, something he did not fully comprehend or control, was imminent, that this simple act of kindness had somehow shifted the very air around them. Adwoa traversed a tranquil lane, now shaded partially by the clouds, following the elderly woman's slow steps. They arrived at a modest dwelling situated peacefully at the end of the path. The residence appeared ancient, clearly having stood for many years. The walls bore numerous fissures and cracks, telltale signs of age and perhaps neglect, but the ground immediately surrounding the house was immaculately clean, swept meticulously, and the blossoms near the corner of the building appeared vibrant and well cared for. A small burst of life against the old structure. Adwoa paused at the entrance to the small compound and scanned the surroundings, taking in the peaceful atmosphere. "Is this your abode, mother?" she inquired gently, confirming their destination. "Indeed, my child," the woman replied softly, indicating a small, gnarled tree standing beside the doorway. "Please place the water vessel there, beside that tree." Adwoa proceeded slowly and carefully towards the designated spot, carrying the weight upon her head. She stooped down with care and set down the vessel gently beside the tree, taking care not to spill any precious water. She arose and wiped her countenance with the back of her hand, brushing away perspiration and dust. "I must depart now, mother," she said, her duty fulfilled, just as Adwoa prepared to exit the compound, ready to rejoin Kofi and perhaps still seek the elusive employment. The elderly woman summoned her back, her voice calm, but holding a note of request. "My child," she spoke softly, "tarry a moment longer. Do not hasten away just yet." Adwoa halted immediately and turned back, sensing the woman had something more to say or do. The woman approached her and held her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Please," she said, her eyes holding Adwoa's gaze. "Proceed to that corner yonder, by the wall. You will perceive a small, traditional pot resting there. Fetch it for me if you would be so kind." Adwoa, though curious, did as she was asked without hesitation. She walked to the specified corner, her digits trembling slightly as she lifted the small, earthenware vessel. It felt cool and surprisingly heavy in her hands. She turned and walked back quickly, clutching the pot with both hands, holding it securely. "Here, mother," she said, presenting it obediently to the elderly woman. The woman smiled, a genuine, warm expression of gratitude. The elderly woman handled the pot with great care, as if it held something precious and fragile. She undid the crimson fabric that was tied around the neck of the pot, loosening it slowly, and very gradually uncovered the vessel, revealing its contents. Adwoa leaned closer, her eyes dilated with curiosity, wondering what the woman kept hidden in this way. Then, the woman produced something truly resplendent, something that caught the filtered sunlight and seemed to glow from within. It was an ingot of pure gold. Adwoa's eyes widened considerably, her breath catching in her throat. She had never witnessed actual gold before, not outside of tales and distant dreams. The woman smiled and regarded her with immense tenderness and warmth. "You are kind, my dear child," she said softly. "Individuals such as yourself, with such selfless hearts, are scarce in this world." She laid the gleaming gold ingot gently in Adwoa's open palm. "Retain possession of it for 7 days," she instructed, her voice firm despite its softness. "Refrain from selling it prematurely, no matter your need or temptation. After 7 days have passed, exactly 1 week, you may dispose of it as you see fit and utilize the proceeds wisely to enhance your existence, to build a better future for yourself." Adwoa gazed at the gold resting in her hand in utter astonishment, the reality of the situation barely registering. Then, overwhelmed by the unexpected generosity and the sheer weight of the gift's meaning, she sank to her knees before the elderly woman. "Mother, my deepest gratitude," she said, her voice thick with emotion and filled with elation and disbelief. "May the divine favor you abundantly. I anticipated no recompense for my small act. I assisted you solely because it felt like the virtuous course of action, the right thing to do." The elderly woman inclined her head gently and gently caressed Adwoa's head, a gesture of maternal blessing. "Depart now, my child," she said with a knowing smile. "Your inherent benevolence, your readiness to help another without thought of reward, will pave the way for further opportunities and blessings for you." Adwoa arose, still clutching the gold ingot firmly, its weight a grounding reality in her trembling hand. Her eyes gleamed with unshed tears and burgeoning hope. She turned and slowly moved away, exiting the compound, her heart overflowing with gratitude and a sense of wonder. With a broad smile gracing her countenance, a smile she couldn't suppress, she proceeded towards her own dwelling. She repeatedly glanced down at her handbag, where she had carefully concealed the precious treasure, a secret source of immense joy. She felt an overwhelming urge to exclaim loudly, to shout her good fortune to the world, but she wisely restrained herself. As she walked, passers-by observed her, their faces questioning, and pondered why she was smiling so brightly, so gleefully, unaccompanied on the dusty thoroughfare. But Adwoa was unconcerned by their silent questions. She was lost in her own thoughts and happiness. She was contemplating a single individual, Kofi. I must recount everything to him, she murmured to herself, feeling a surge of excitement to share her incredible news with her companion. She increased her pace, her weary legs forgotten, nearly running with anticipation. When she arrived at the thoroughfare where Kofi resided, her smile broadened even further. She saw him standing before his dwelling, his communication device pressed to his ear, seemingly engaged in conversation. Her smile was full of eagerness to share. She waved enthusiastically and hailed, "Kofi, wait for me." But Kofi did not reciprocate the gesture, did not return her wave or her smile. He slowly lowered the device from his ear and regarded her with an unyielding, almost cold expression. Adwoa paused before him, her own smile still present, though a flicker of confusion crossed her face. "Kofi," she said, slightly breathless from her hurried walk, "I have something truly incredible to impart to you, something you won't believe." She gestured back the way she had come. "You will not credit what transpired following my departure from the path." But Kofi abruptly lifted his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "So you simply abandoned me thus, Adwoa?" he said, his voice devoid of its usual casual tone, instead flat and cold, devoid of warmth or understanding. Adwoa's smile diminished, a shadow falling over her excitement. "I did not desert you, Kofi. I simply aided the elderly woman, do you recall? The one who was struggling so." Kofi nodded his head in slow, deliberate negation, his expression hardening further. "I believed you were earnest regarding securing that employment, that you truly needed and wanted the position. But nay, you discarded it so readily, prioritizing a momentary charitable impulse over a real opportunity. Do you perceive existence and the need for work as a mere jest?" Adwoa cast her gaze downward, feeling a pang of guilt mixed with frustration. "I know the job was important," she said softly. But you consistently articulate a desire for an improved existence, for a better life, for security." Kofi interrupted, his voice rising slightly in exasperation. "Yet, when action is required, when difficult choices must be made, you hasten away to engage in fleeting acts of heroism or kindness that yield nothing tangible." Adwoa's hands commenced trembling, not from cold, but from a mixture of distress and rising defensiveness. "Such was not the case this time, Kofi. Please permit me to elucidate, to explain what truly happened." Kofi averted his countenance completely, turning his head away as if to signal the end of the conversation. "No explanation is warranted," he stated curtly. "Your actions speak for themselves." "Kofi, hold on a moment," Adwoa urged swiftly, unwilling to let him dismiss her. She fumbled into her handbag with trembling hands, eager to show him the proof that would change his mind. "Pray observe this, Kofi," she added, opening the bag fully, revealing its contents. She gradually, dramatically, withdrew the ingot of gold. The gold gleamed so brilliantly in the late afternoon sun that Kofi's eyes expanded, wide with shock and disbelief. He remained speechless for a moment, rooted to the spot. He just stood motionless, his gaze fixated upon the object in her hand, a silent question hanging in the air. Then his voice emerged, low and cutting, laced with suspicion. "From where did you acquire this, Adwoa? Tell me the truth. From where did you get it? Did you purloin it?" Adwoa's eyes opened wide in astonishment and hurt. "Nay, Kofi, I did not purloin aught," she stated firmly, deeply offended by the accusation. "I would never do such a thing." Kofi advanced a step closer, his intense gaze still fixed upon the gold, ignoring her denial. "Divulge the truth immediately, Adwoa." Objects of this nature, of such value. One does not simply discover such items upon the thoroughfare like a fallen leaf. I did not encounter it upon the path, Kofi, Adwoa said softly but clearly. It was given to me. I implore you, heed my words. Listen to what I am telling you. Adwoa looked Kofi directly in the eyes, searching for understanding. The elderly woman bestowed it upon me, she said, explaining the incredible event. She gave it to me after I assisted her in transporting the water vessel to her dwelling. Kofi frowned deeply, clearly skeptical. An aged woman, living in what appeared to be poverty, presented you with gold? Just like that? His tone conveyed his disbelief more strongly than his words. Indeed, Kofi, Adwoa replied, her voice now composed, though still earnest. Her dwelling was ancient, and her appearance suggested a life of hardship and poverty, but when I assisted her, when I carried the water for her, she instructed me to retrieve a small pot for her from behind the house. The gold resided within that pot. She stated it was a token of appreciation, a reward for my kindness and willingness to help. Kofi remained silent for a long moment, processing this information that defied his logical, cynical view of the world. He gazed down at the gold in Adwoa's hand, then slowly lifted his eyes to look upon her face again, searching for any sign of deceit. His lips parted slowly. She simply conferred this valuable ingot upon you without ceremony as payment for carrying water? Adwoa nodded, confirming this seemingly impossible truth. Indeed, that is precisely what happened. And she instructed me to retain it for 7 days prior to its sale, telling me not to touch it until then. Kofi uttered nothing further for a time. He just continued to gaze at the gold, his mind clearly working through the implications of its existence and its source. Then he slowly moistened his lips, and a smile began to form on his face. Yet, Adwoa noticed immediately, it was not a joyful smile, not one of shared happiness for her good fortune. It was a peculiar smile, thin and knowing, a smile that caused Adwoa's heart to beat a little more rapidly in her chest. She could not discern why, exactly, yet something about his expression, the way he looked at the gold, felt distinctly amiss, a subtle wrongness that chilled her sudden joy. Following Adwoa's departure, after she had left him standing there with her unbelievable story and the sight of the gleaming gold, Kofi remained outdoors. He did not immediately enter the house where he lived. He just seated himself upon the small wooden seat by the wall, his usual restlessness replaced by a strange stillness. His gaze was fixed upon the earth at his feet, but his thoughts raced rapidly within his mind, tumultuous and consuming. How could an elderly woman, a seemingly impoverished one at that, bestow gold upon another? He spoke quietly to himself, voicing his internal conflict. She dwells in a dilapidated habitation, one that speaks of little wealth. She appears to be living in hardship, lacking even basic comforts. Something is fundamentally incongruous here, he concluded, the pieces not fitting together in a way he understood. He rose from the seat, then, unable to settle, reseated himself almost immediately. I must locate that woman again. I must behold her myself, see her dwelling, understand where this gold came from. He looked along the thoroughfare from which Adwoa had come, his eyes narrowing in thought. Then he murmured to himself, his voice low and driven by nascent greed. If she granted Adwoa gold, simply for carrying a vessel of water, perhaps she possesses additional stores. Perhaps there is more where that came from. The subsequent morning, Kofi departed his dwelling betimes, rising before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, fueled by this new, obsessive thought. He disclosed his destination to no one. This was a matter he needed to investigate alone. He repaired to the same thoroughfare where he and Adwoa had encountered the elderly woman days earlier. He positioned himself beneath the sparse shade of a tree near the bend in the path and awaited, his gaze fixed on the direction from which she had come. Individuals passed by on their daily errands. The sun's heat intensified throughout the morning, growing more oppressive, but the elderly woman did not appear. He returned the following day, determined. Yet again, she failed to materialize on the path. It was the third subsequent day, after 2 days of fruitless waiting, that Kofi was once more standing at the street corner, his patience wearing thin but his resolve unbroken. His garment was saturated with perspiration from the relentless heat and his long wait, but He was indifferent to his physical discomfort, his focus absolute. Then, finally, he perceived her, moving slowly in the distance, the same elderly woman, unmistakably. She was proceeding slowly, painstakingly, with a container of water balanced precariously once again upon her head. Her feet moved softly upon the dusty track, each step deliberate and measured. Kofi's eyes brightened with a mix of relief and eager anticipation. This was his chance. He hurried to her side, adopting a helpful demeanor. "Mother," he said, his voice carefully modulated to sound solicitous, "please, permit me to assist you with this heavy burden." He extended his hand towards the container on her head, already reaching for it. The elderly woman paused in her slow walk and regarded him directly. She remained silent initially, her ancient eyes holding his gaze for a long moment. She just looked into his eyes, seemingly attempting to discern the true motives of his heart, looking beyond his words and eager gestures. Then, slowly and deliberately, she inclined her head, granting him permission, and handed him the container of water. Kofi carefully balanced the water upon his own head and commenced walking, following her in silence, a sense of purpose guiding his steps. He appeared serene and composed externally, like a dutiful helper, but internally, his thoughts raced uncontrollably, fueled by expectation and greed. "This is my opportunity," he told himself repeatedly. "This is my chance to gain what Adwoa gained, perhaps more." They reached the woman's compound, precisely as it had been described, exactly as Adwoa had said. The walls showed cracks and fissures, signs of its age, but everything surrounding the dwelling was tidy and well-maintained. Kofi set down the container of water with exaggerated care beside the small tree and turned to confront her, preparing to enact the next part of his plan. He introduced a feigned tremor into his voice, aiming for sincerity and vulnerability. "Mother," he spoke softly, looking down slightly, "I wish to express my deepest regret for the manner in which I addressed you previously, the other day." The woman regarded him silently, her expression unreadable. She did not utter a single word in response, simply observing him. "My father is gravely unwell, mother," Kofi continued, embellishing his fabricated tale, his voice thick with false sorrow. "He has been confined to his bed for days, growing weaker, and we utterly lack the means to acquire the medicine he desperately needs to recover." He subtly wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, although no actual tears flowed, a practiced gesture of distress. "I was unaware of any other place to turn, any other source of help," he said, his voice trailing off into a mournful sigh. "That is my true reason for coming here today, mother, to seek assistance in my time of need." He bowed his head, feigning profound sorrow and waiting expectantly. But deep within his heart, he was not concerned with any ailing father. The story was merely a tool. He was consumed by a singular, glittering thought: the gold. The elderly woman regarded Kofi for an extended period, her gaze steady and perceptive, seemingly seeing through his performance. Then, her voice serene yet her eyes incredibly keen, she inquired, "My son, tell me, do I appear to be a person of wealth? Does this humble dwelling suggest I possess the means to provide for the needs of others, even for grave illnesses?" Her question was pointed, directly challenging his unspoken request. Kofi parted his lips to speak, but finding no immediate, convincing response, remained silent. He merely cast his gaze downward again and sniffled audibly, still maintaining the pretense of lamentation and distress. The woman exhaled a sigh, a soft sound that nonetheless seemed weighted with ancient knowledge and weariness at human deceit. She turned slowly and commenced walking, her steps deliberate, into her modest dwelling. Kofi stood there silently, unsure what to do next. He observed her receding form as she departed, a knot of uncertainty tightening in his stomach. Then, determined not to leave empty-handed, he sank to the ground where he stood, covered his face with his hands, and emitted soft sounds of distress, a calculated display of despair. But in his thoughts, his mind was racing, calculating. If she bestowed gold upon Adwoa for simple kindness and carrying water, she can surely grant me 2 ingots, perhaps even more, given my desperate situation and my service. Just as the woman reached her doorway, paused, and glanced back at him, as if she had sensed his lingering presence and unspoken expectation. "Kofi," she summoned, her voice quiet but clear. He looked up swiftly, his feigned distress momentarily forgotten. She indicated with her digit towards the rear of the dwelling. "Proceed behind the dwelling," she instructed him. "Beneath the tree there lies a small vessel. Fetch it for me from its hiding place." Kofi did not hesitate. His feigned sorrow vanished instantly, replaced by a surge of eager anticipation. He leapt up from the ground. "My gratitude, mother," he said quickly, his voice now sounding genuinely eager, and raced to the rear of the dwelling. There, beneath the small, leafy mango tree she had indicated, he spied the pot. It was indeed small, dark and spherical, and was enveloped by a piece of aged, possibly significant, fabric. He scanned the surroundings quickly, his eyes darting left and right. No one else was present. He was alone and unobserved. His heart pounded with excitement. He raised the cloth that covered the pot. His eyes expanded in astonishment and greedy delight. Within the pot, resting together, lay ingots of resplendent gold. Not one, not two, as he had hoped, but numerous, a veritable hoard of the gleaming metal, far exceeding his wildest expectations. Kofi clutched the pot, his hands trembling not from feigned distress, but from genuine avarice and excitement, and gazed at the gold inside. His hand trembled as he reached out, almost involuntarily, to touch one of the ingots. He scanned the surroundings again, a furtive glance. No one was observing him. No one could see his actions. He touched one of the smooth, heavy ingots and whispered to himself, his voice barely audible, consumed by temptation. "Ought I to seize everything? Take it all? She will remain ignorant. She won't know it was me." He hesitated for a brief, fleeting moment, a tiny spark of conscience or fear flickering within him. Then he looked towards the heavens, as if seeking guidance or perhaps just acknowledging a higher power, and sighed deeply. "Nay," he declared, deciding against taking the entirety, perhaps still fearing unseen consequences. "I shall not commit such a brazen act." Deliberately, controlling his trembling hands, he returned the gold ingots he had lifted back inside the pot. He covered it again carefully with the aged fabric and conveyed it back towards the front of the dwelling. The elderly woman was seated upon a small wooden bench outside her dwelling, awaiting his return. He set down the pot before her and compelled a faint, unconvincing smile to his lips. The elderly woman regarded the pot for a moment, her gaze resting upon it. Then she looked up at Kofi, her eyes calm but knowing. She slowly inclined her head slightly, as if she discerned precisely what he had been thinking and contemplating while he was out of her sight. She opened the pot and, without hesitation, selected a single gold ingot, just one. She arose and placed it directly within Kofi's hand, the familiar weight of the metal against his palm. "Accept this one," she said, her voice serene but firm. "Safeguard it carefully for 7 days, as I instructed Adwoa. Do not handle it unnecessarily within that time. Subsequently, after the designated period has passed, you may dispose of it as you wish." Kofi nodded rapidly, perhaps too rapidly, eager to secure his prize. "My gratitude, mother," he said, forcing a grateful expression. But internally, he felt a sharp pang of discontent and frustration. "One," he mused bitterly to himself. "Merely one ingot?" Adwoa received one, simply for carrying water for a few minutes. And now I, who came with a tale of grave illness and returned the pot even after seeing the treasure, I, too, receive only one, yet I beheld so much more within that pot. Why may I not possess the entirety, or at least a significant portion?" He continued to smile at the woman, his expression feigning contentment, but in his heart, consumed by greed and disappointment, he was already devising an alternative scheme, a way to rectify what he perceived as an injustice. The elderly woman, seemingly oblivious to his internal turmoil, indicated towards the rear of the dwelling once more. "Now, return the vessel to its rightful place of discovery," she said, her voice a quiet instruction. Kofi nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "Indeed, mother. I shall do so immediately." He picked up the pot containing the remaining gold and commenced walking towards the rear, his steps measured. As he moved away from her, he glanced back over his shoulder, a quick, furtive movement, to ascertain if the elderly woman was observing his actions. As he arrived at the rear of the dwelling, out of the woman's sight, he halted abruptly. His heart pounded rapidly in his chest, a frantic drumbeat fueled by temptation. He stooped down, his movements quick and purposeful, reopened the vessel again and gazed within. The gold ingots remained there, still resplendent, still beckoning him. He smiled, a thin, avaricious smile this time. Swiftly, before he could hesitate, he seized 3 additional ingots from the pot and concealed them within his garment, pressing them against his body. Then he quickly closed the pot and replaced it carefully beneath the tree, trying to make it look undisturbed. He wiped his hands on his clothes, trying to erase any trace of his act, and walked back towards the front, smiling broadly now, as if nothing untoward had occurred, as if he were merely completing the task he was given. The elderly woman was standing by the doorway as he approached, her posture still and observant. She looked directly at him, her gaze steady, and spoke, her voice calm but holding an unnerving directness. "You did not tamper with anything within the vessel while it was out of my sight, did you, Kofi?" Kofi chuckled swiftly, a nervous, forced sound, and scratched his head, feigning innocence. "Nay, mother, of course not. I merely returned it precisely as you instructed me to do." The woman regarded him for an extended duration, her eyes holding his, searching. Then she slowly inclined her head, a subtle gesture. "Very well," she said softly, her voice conveying a quiet understanding that unsettled him. "You may depart now." Kofi smiled again, relieved the scrutiny was over, and turned to make his exit, clutching the pilfered gold close to his chest beneath his garment. But deep within his heart, despite his supposed success, he sensed a faint, persistent apprehension, a cold prickle of fear. Did she perceive it? Did she witness me somehow? Nevertheless, driven by the weight of the gold and the prospect of wealth, he walked away, leaving the compound behind, clutching the pilfered gold close to his chest, a heavy secret. It was a peaceful afternoon several days later. Adwoa arrived home, carrying provisions she had managed to acquire, feeling a sense of relief that she had secured some necessities. As she approached the doorway of her dwelling, she was astonished to find the elderly woman seated tranquilly upon her doorstep, seemingly awaiting her return. Mother," Adwoa exclaimed, surprised but also concerned, setting down her bag of provisions. "How fares your health today? I trust all is well with you." The elderly woman regarded her, her countenance serene, as always, yet her eyes were piercing, holding a depth of inquiry that immediately put Adwoa on edge. "Adwoa," she spoke slowly, her voice measured, "I must ask you something. It is important. Did you take my gold?" Adwoa's mouth fell open in shock, her heart leaping violently in her chest with sudden fear and confusion. "What?" she exclaimed, the word escaping on a gasp. "Nay, mother, I did not. I swear to you, I would never commit such an act of theft." The elderly woman remained silent, offering no immediate comfort or retraction. She just continued to regard Adwoa, her gaze unwavering, her expression unreadable. Adwoa's hands commenced trembling, a nervous reaction she couldn't control. "I swear it upon everything I hold dear, mother," she said, her voice thick with emotion, tears welling in her eyes from the shock and the gravity of the accusation. "I did not touch anything that did not belong to me." Following the elderly woman's quiet departure, after she had left Adwoa reeling from the accusation, Adwoa seated herself upon the floor of her dwelling, trying to calm her trembling hands and contemplating the bewildering encounter. "Why would she pose such a question to me?" she murmured to herself, reviewing the conversation in her mind. "Why would she suspect me?" Then her eyes widened as a terrible possibility dawned on her. Her mind returned swiftly to the subject of the gold ingot the woman had given her. She recalled vividly how she had recounted everything, every detail of the gift, to Kofi. She recalled how he had continuously gazed at the gold in her hand, his eyes fixed upon it, the peculiar smile that had unsettled her. She closed her eyes, trying to dismiss the unwelcome thought. "Nay," she told herself firmly, trying to cling to her trust. "He is my companion, my friend. He could not possibly do that to me, to the old woman." But something felt deeply amiss, a disquieting feeling she couldn't shake. He had not contacted her since that day, had not inquired about her welfare or the gold. And now, the elderly woman's gold was apparently absent. Adwoa clasped her head with both hands, a gesture of distress, the terrible possibility becoming more and more real. What if, indeed, Kofi had done it? She wished desperately not to believe it, to dismiss the suspicion as unthinkable. But deep within her heart, a small, persistent voice murmured, cold and rational, "Investigate his situation, Adwoa. Go and see him. Find out the truth." Adwoa found sleep impossible that night. Her heart was too burdened by the accusation, the suspicion, and the knowledge of the missing gold. The subsequent morning, early and determined, she proceeded directly to Kofi's dwelling. She knocked firmly upon the door, her resolve set. He emerged after a moment, yawning and looking disheveled, clearly having just woken. "Kofi," she spoke, standing directly before him, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "Did you appropriate the elderly woman's gold?" Kofi's eyes widened in surprise at her direct question. Then his expression quickly changed, contorting into a scowl of indignation. He exclaimed, his voice loud with feigned outrage. "Are you well, Adwoa? Have you lost your mind? Why would you utter such a ridiculous thing to me?" "Because she came to my dwelling yesterday and inquired about it," Adwoa explained, holding his gaze. "And you, Kofi, you were the sole other individual who beheld the gold after she gave it to me." Kofi raised his hand in a theatrical gesture of indignation, stepping back slightly. "Do not affront me with such baseless accusations. I am even unaware of the elderly woman's abode. I don't know where she lives." "Then why are you shouting so loudly, Kofi?" Adwoa inquired calmly, her question piercing his manufactured anger. Kofi averted his countenance, refusing to meet her gaze directly. "I am finished with this absurdity," he said dismissively and walked away, shaking his head in negation, retreating back into his dwelling. That evening, as dusk began to settle, Kofi returned to his dwelling, feeling a sense of triumph and anticipation. He was whistling a cheerful tune as he opened the entrance gate, anticipating the moment he could handle his pilfered treasure in private. But when he reached his doorway, the whistling died on his lips, and he halted abruptly. The elderly woman was seated there, tranquil and composed, just as she had been at Adwoa's dwelling. Kofi's eyes widened with shock and a sudden, cold dread. "Mother," he inquired, his voice hesitant, "why are you here outside my dwelling?" She looked up at him, her serene eyes holding his, and inquired softly, her voice carrying an unnerving weight, "Where is my gold, Kofi?" Kofi chuckled swiftly, a nervous, involuntary sound, and scratched his head again, resorting to the same pretense he had used before. "Mother," he stammered, I kept it precisely where you instructed me to. I did not touch anything. I swear to you, I am telling the truth." The woman's eyes remained unblinking, her gaze steady and penetrating. She regarded him lengthily and profoundly, searching his face, his posture, his trembling hands for any sign of deceit. Then, after a long silence, she spoke, her voice soft, yet her words possessed an undeniable strength and authority that sent a shiver down Kofi's spine. "Are you certain, Kofi? Absolutely certain you did not touch that which was not yours?" Kofi nodded rapidly, perhaps too rapidly, his head bobbing in affirmation, yet his hands, clasped behind his back, trembled uncontrollably, betraying his lie. The elderly woman rose slowly from where she sat, her movements deliberate and purposeful, gaining stature as she stood. She regarded Kofi with serene, ancient eyes, her expression calm but discerning. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet her words possessed immense strength and power that resonated in the quiet evening air. "If you have taken it, Kofi," she said, her voice unwavering, "restore it immediately. Return that which you have taken. If you fail to do so, prepare for the consequences." Kofi parted his lips to speak, to offer another denial or excuse, but no utterance emerged. The words caught in his throat. The elderly woman turned and departed, walking slowly away into the gathering twilight. She did not look back. Kofi stood at the doorway, his hand resting upon the wall for support. He breathed rapidly, his heart pounding in his chest, a drumbeat of fear and defiance. He scanned the surroundings, ensuring she was truly gone, then said to himself, trying to bolster his courage, "She is merely an elderly woman. What real power does she possess? She is powerless against my ingenuity. My riches are imminent. I shall be well. Nothing can touch me now." He entered his dwelling and secured the door firmly, trying to lock out the woman's words and the unease they caused. But that night, sleep eluded him entirely. The weight of the stolen gold felt heavier than he had anticipated, and the woman's serene, knowing gaze haunted his thoughts. Several days thereafter, something peculiar, something disturbing, occurred in the settlement. Individuals in the thoroughfare beheld Kofi wandering about without footwear, his steps erratic and aimless. His garments were soiled and tattered, ripped in places, no longer the clothes of a young man full of schemes. His hair was disheveled and matted, his face appeared bewildered and vacant, marked by confusion and distress. He was laughing sporadically and conversing loudly with himself, his voice disjointed and nonsensical. "Gold, I am wealthy," he cried out at random intervals, casting handfuls of sand into the air as if it were glittering treasure. Children fled from him, their faces etched with fear. Some women shuttered their stalls nervously and gazed fixedly at the spectacle, whispering amongst themselves. "Is that not Kofi, the one who is always so sharp?" One man inquired of another, his voice low with concern. "What fate has befallen him? What could have caused such a terrible transformation?" No one possessed an answer. His condition was a mystery, a source of fear and pity. Adwoa was walking along the thoroughfare, clutching her small satchel of belongings, perhaps heading to the market or seeking work. The sun was scorching once again, beating down on the busy path, and individuals were moving to and fro, the rhythm of daily life continuing despite the heat. Then she perceived someone approaching from the opposing direction, moving strangely. The person was without footwear, his feet stirring the dust. His shirt was rent and dirty. His hair was disarranged and wild. He was conversing loudly with himself and laughing, a disturbing, hollow sound. Adwoa halted, her heart pounding with a terrible premonition. She looked again, squinting against the sun and dust, and exclaimed, the name escaping her lips on a gasp of horror. "Kofi." The man paused in his erratic movement and regarded her, his bloodshot eyes fixed upon her face for a moment of chilling, vacant recognition. His lips were parched and cracked from exposure. "Kofi, is that truly you in this state?" she inquired again, her voice trembling, barely able to believe the spectacle before her. But Kofi averted his face, turning away as if he didn't know her, and commenced walking away once more, still conversing indistinctly with himself, lost in his own world. Adwoa stood motionless for a moment, rooted to the spot, unable to credit the terrible spectacle before her eyes. This was the consequence she had feared, far worse than she could have imagined. She then quickly moved towards him, determination hardening her resolve. Before he could proceed far down the thoroughfare, she seized his shirt from behind, her grip firm. "Halt there, Kofi," she cried, her voice urgent and demanding. Kofi attempted to pull free from her grasp, flailing his arms, but he was feeble, his strength clearly depleted by his condition. "You are going nowhere like this," Adwoa asserted, clutching him firmly, refusing to let go. "Explain what has befallen you, Kofi. Who, or what inflicted this terrible thing upon you?" Kofi regarded her with weary, unfocused eyes, a semblance of recognition flickering amidst the madness. He smiled, the peculiar, unsettling smile she had seen before, and murmured, his voice low and conspiratorial, "The gold, Adwoa. The gold converses with me now." Adwoa's hand trembled, her heart sinking with a terrible certainty. She drew him gently but firmly to the periphery of the thoroughfare, seeking a moment of slightly less public space. "Kofi, speak to me clearly, I implore you," she pleaded, desperately trying to reach him. "What gold are you speaking of? What transgression, what wrong thing, did you commit to bring this upon yourself?" But Kofi merely laughed again, a high, unsettling sound, and pointed towards the heavens with a shaky hand. "Wealth is pleasant, Adwoa," he said, his words disjointed, "but it can consume your mind, it can take you away." Adwoa gazed into his eyes, seeing the madness there, and felt a chilling sensation spread throughout her entire being. "I hope this is not what I suspect," she whispered to herself, the terrible truth solidifying in her mind. Kofi looked back at Adwoa, a strange light in his eyes. Then he commenced laughing loudly, a wild, uncontrolled sound like one who had utterly lost his sanity. He spun in circles where he stood and flailed his hands erratically into the air, as if trying to grasp invisible things. "I seize her gold. I took the gold. It was I," he chanted loudly, a confession born of his madness. He clapped his hands together and laughed again, oblivious to his surroundings. Individuals on the thoroughfare paused in their activities to observe the distressing spectacle. Some negated with their heads, shaking them in pity or disapproval. Others murmured amongst themselves, "This young man, Kofi, has lost his senses completely." Adwoa stood there, her mouth agape, the horrifying truth laid bare by his deranged confession. She moved nearer to him, her heart aching with pity and horror, then held his arm tightly again and inquired, her voice low and urgent, needing to hear it confirmed even in his madness. "Do you mean you purloined the gold from the elderly woman, Kofi? Tell me the truth now, I need to know." Kofi looked at her, his eyes wide and vacant. Then he smiled in a peculiar, unsettling manner, a twisted version of his former calculating smile, and commenced dancing strangely in place. "I instructed the vessel to remain silent," he said, pointing towards the heavens again, talking to things only he could see. But the vessel cried out. The gold was heavy, so heavy, yet I concealed it beneath my garment.
"Shh.
Do not inform the tree. It was watching." Adwoa recoiled slightly, shocked not only by his confession, but by the bizarre details. "You deceived me, Kofi," she said, her voice filled with pain and disappointment. "You claimed you did not take it, that you didn't even know where she lived. Why did you lie to me, Kofi?" Kofi commenced laughing again, the sound raw and meaningless. "I was going to erect a dwelling in the sky," he spoke, the words rambling and fantastical as he began crawling upon the ground. "A large one, Adwoa, with chairs of gold and a speaking portal, just for me." Adwoa covered her mouth with her hands, a gesture of utter despair. Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot streaks through the dust on her face. Kofi had completely lost his sanity, his mind shattered by the consequences of his actions. And now she understood the terrible reason why. Adwoa scanned the surroundings, seeking help. Individuals were still standing afar, observing the distressing scene, but no one was approaching. She held Kofi's arm tightly, determined not to leave him. "You are coming with me now, Kofi," she said firmly, trying to infuse her voice with authority. "We are going to visit that elderly woman immediately. Perhaps she can help you." But Kofi exclaimed, resisting her pull, "Nay, release me. The gold is mine. Mine and the amphibians. They promised me." He attempted to pull away from her grip with surprising force given his state. He kicked his legs and flailed his hands, his movements uncoordinated and wild. Adwoa held on firmly, sweating from the effort and the heat. "Assist me," she cried out to the onlookers, her voice desperate. "I beg of you, someone aid me in restraining him. He needs help." Kofi commenced rolling upon the ground, laughing hysterically and shouting, "The heavens are descending. The heavens are descending. The gold is calling." A tall man wearing distinctive headwear, who had been observing with concern, stepped forward from the crowd. "What is occurring here, young woman?" he inquired calmly, assessing the situation. Adwoa turned to him, still gripping Kofi's arm tightly, preventing him from rolling away. "Pray, good sir," she spoke quickly, her voice pleading, "this is my companion. His name is Kofi. Something is deeply amiss with him. He has lost his sanity." Kofi was now crawling upon the ground, seemingly conversing with a stone he had picked up. Adwoa continued, explaining her need. "I require assistance to convey him to someone who might be able to help him. I beg you, kind sir, aid me in restraining him and taking him there." The man regarded Kofi with compassion and nodded his head. "Very well," he said, stepping closer. "Let us bear him together. He is clearly in need of swift assistance." Kofi suddenly rose from the ground, his eyes wide with a fleeting, mad fear, and exclaimed, "Do not permit the vessel to behold me. It will see the gold is gone." The tall man restrained him gently but firmly from one side, taking hold of his arm. Adwoa restrained him from the other. Together, they began to move slowly, guiding the struggling, mumbling Kofi towards the elderly woman's dwelling, a shared burden of compassion and responsibility. They reached the modest compound as the sun was setting, casting long shadows. The place was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos they brought with them. The elderly woman was seated outside her dwelling upon her small wooden bench, just as she had been when Kofi returned the pot. She had her staff resting beside her, and her gaze was upon the earth before her feet. She did not look up immediately, seemingly lost to her thoughts. She appeared to be in deep contemplation, as if her heart was burdened by something unseen. Her countenance was serene, as always, yet her eyes appeared weary, as if she had been expecting something or someone like them. Kofi was mumbling disjointedly behind Adwoa, his voice a low stream of madness. "The vessel, the gold," the amphibian said. "Do not touch it. Don't tell the tree. Heavy gold." Adwoa ran ahead of the men who were holding Kofi, her desperation mounting, and fell to her knees before the elderly woman. "Mother, I beg you," she cried, her voice thick with tears and urgency. "Please assist him. Only you can help him." The elderly woman slowly looked up from the ground, her serene gaze meeting Adwoa's tear-filled eyes. Adwoa gestured behind her towards Kofi, who was still muttering incoherently, tracing patterns on the dusty ground with his finger. "It is Kofi, mother," Adwoa explained, pouring out the truth. "He is the one who took your gold. He deceived you, he lied to your face. And now this terrible thing has happened to him. He has lost his sanity because of it." The elderly woman uttered no word immediately. She just listened to Adwoa's impassioned plea, her eyes calm and knowing. Adwoa's voice trembled as she continued, her love for her misguided companion overriding her anger at his betrayal. "Please, mother, if you possess the power, help him," she pleaded. "He repeatedly calls your name in his madness, mother," he said. "Only you can assist him, as if he knows deep down that you are the source of this affliction." The elderly woman regarded Kofi, her gaze lingering on his distressed form. She took one slow, deliberate step towards him, her presence commanding attention. Her eyes were keen and ancient, yet her voice remained serene, devoid of anger or judgment. "When my gold went missing," she said, addressing Adwoa but looking towards Kofi, "I inquired of him, giving him an opportunity to confess. I looked him directly in the eye." She indicated Kofi, who was now seated upon the ground, tracing his patterns and occasionally emitting a hollow laugh. "I afforded him a chance, a moment to speak the truth, and perhaps avert this consequence." The elderly woman continued, her voice steady. "He said, 'Nay,' to my face. He lied, Adwoa. He denied taking it." Adwoa looked up swiftly at the woman, her eyes filled with renewed concern and understanding. The elderly woman slowly shook her head in negation, confirming Adwoa's worst fear about the source of Kofi's madness. "Now, that which ails him, this madness that consumes his mind, is not from my hand, Adwoa," she stated clearly. "It emanated from above, from a power far greater than my own. I am unable to assist him. My power does not extend to such matters of divine retribution." She turned away from Kofi, a gesture of finality. Adwoa, seeing her turn, leapt up from her knees and ran to the elderly woman, clutching her wrapper tightly, desperate not to lose this possibility of help. "Mother, I beg you," she cried, her voice breaking with emotion. "Please do it for my sake. For the sake of the kindness you found in me." Tears streamed from her eyes, falling onto the woman's cloth wrapper. "I know he acted wrongly," she sobbed. "I know he appropriated what was not rightfully his, that he stole and lied." The elderly woman ceased walking away, pausing at Adwoa's heartfelt plea. "But I beg you, mother, forgive him," Adwoa reiterated, her grip tightening on the fabric. "Please, I implore you, help him. He is suffering so terribly. He is not himself." Silence ensued, heavy and expectant. Even Kofi, in his madness, seemed to cease his laughter for a moment. He slowly looked up, his gaze seemingly focused, as if he had clearly heard her voice piercing through the fog in his mind. The elderly woman turned back fully and regarded both of them, Adwoa's tearful, pleading face and Kofi's bewildered, suffering form on the ground. Then, after a moment of contemplation, she spoke, her voice calm but holding a hint of deliberation. Allow me to consider your plea, my child. The elderly woman regarded Adwoa for an extended period, her ancient eyes studying the young woman's face. She saw the genuine tears upon her countenance, the depth of her compassion. She saw how tightly Adwoa was holding her wrapper, a physical manifestation of her desperate plea. She saw the virtuous heart that had prompted Adwoa to help her in the first place. Then she slowly inclined her head, a small gesture of assent. "Were it not for your virtuous heart, Adwoa," the woman declared, her voice gentle but firm, "were it not for the kindness you have shown me and your compassion for this misguided young man, I would not assist him." She looked at Kofi again, reciting his transgressions. "He lied to me. He stole that which did not belong to him. And in doing so, he ridiculed the very grace that had been offered." She looked at Kofi, who was now seated upon the ground, no longer crawling, plucking grass blades and laughing softly to himself. "But owing to you, Adwoa," the woman spoke softly, making it clear that the effort was for her sake, "because of the goodness I see in you, I shall endeavor. I shall try to help him. I shall make the attempt for your sake." The elderly woman drew a deep breath, gathering some unseen strength. She walked slowly and deliberately to where Kofi was seated on the ground. He looked up at her as she approached with a peculiar, unsettling smile still on his face. She did not return the smile. Her expression was serious, focused. She placed her right hand gently but firmly upon his chest. Then, with a quick, sharp movement, she struck his chest with her palm once, then again a rhythmic, impactful blow. Kofi's body convulsed violently with the impact. Then suddenly, dramatically, he collapsed flat upon the ground, his limbs going slack. His eyes closed, and his body lay still. Adwoa cried out in alarm. "Mother, what has transpired? What have you done to him?" The elderly woman raised her hand into the air, a gesture of authority and finality, and said, her voice calm, "Now we await. The work is done. The rest is not in my hands." The air felt still and heavy around them. Kofi was not moving, lying motionless on the ground. Everyone present, Adwoa, the tall man, even the distant onlookers who had gathered, was silent, holding their breath. Adwoa quickly stooped down beside Kofi's still form and touched him gently, her hand resting on his arm. She gently shook him, her voice filled with urgent concern. "Kofi, awaken," she said, pleading with him. "I beg you, awaken now." Kofi moved his hand slightly. Then slowly, miraculously, he opened his eyes. He blinked, seemingly orienting himself. He scanned the surroundings, his gaze clearing, looking from the ground to the faces above him. "Where am I?" he inquired in a weak, confused voice, the madness seemingly lifted. Then he beheld the elderly woman standing beside him. His eyes opened wide in sudden recognition and fear. He attempted to stand and flee, a residual instinct of fear, but Adwoa and the man beside her swiftly held him down, preventing his escape. "Cease, Kofi," Adwoa said reassuringly, her voice gentle. "You are safe now. You were unwell, Kofi. You were afflicted with madness." He appeared bewildered, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What? Mad?" "I was mad." "Indeed, Kofi," Adwoa affirmed, the reality sinking in. "You lost your sanity. You were wandering about without footwear, speaking nonsense. You were conversing with yourself, and with things that weren't there." Kofi turned slowly to the elderly woman, her presence filling him with a mix of awe and trepidation. You assisted me, mother?" he inquired, seeking confirmation, barely able to grasp the reality of what had happened. The woman did not utter a word, her gaze steady. Adwoa nodded, confirming the woman's grace. "Indeed, Kofi. Mother saved you from your affliction." Kofi knelt upon the ground before the elderly woman, his head bowed in humility and gratitude. "My deepest gratitude, mother. Thank you for preserving me, for restoring my mind. I was unaware of my actions. I was lost. I beg your forgiveness for any wrong I committed." Adwoa looked at him, relieved to see him lucid again, but still needing answers. "Kofi," she spoke, her voice earnest, "I implore you. Where is the gold you took? Divulge the truth now, please." Kofi scratched his head, still looking bewildered by the recent events. He cast his gaze downward, a look of shame crossing his face. I gave it to someone, he uttered slowly, the words difficult to form. To whom, Kofi? Adwoa pressed. To whom did you give it? I do not know his name, Kofi stated, trying to recall the details lost in the fog of his madness. But before I lost consciousness, before the world went strange, he summoned me. He stated. He said the gold had transformed. Adwoa frowned, confused by his words. Transformed? What do you signify, Kofi? What transformed? Kofi appeared frightened, a residue of his ordeal still clinging to him. He said the gold transmuted into pepper. Into red pepper. Adwoa stared at him, incredulous. Red pepper, Kofi? Are you still confused? How could gold turn into pepper? I know not how it happened, Adwoa, Kofi insisted, his voice earnest now, devoid of deceit. That is what he informed me. That is what was said. Adwoa stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. Kofi, are you still lying to me, or do you genuinely perceive me as a fool? I am speaking the absolute truth now, Adwoa, Kofi affirmed, his gaze steady. I swear that is precisely what he stated to me just before everything went dark. Adwoa regarded him with lingering skepticism in her eyes, unsure whether to believe this bizarre explanation. The air grew quiet again, a sense of anticipation settling over the small compound. As Adwoa stood there staring at Kofi, still wrestling with his strange claim, the elderly woman slowly raised her hand, a gesture for silence and attention. Adwoa, she spoke, her voice calm and clear. Pause your questioning. Adwoa turned to regard her, surprised. The woman's voice was serene, as always, but held an undeniable power that commanded belief. Kofi is not fabricating the truth in this instance, she said. Adwoa appeared utterly surprised by this confirmation from the wise woman. What do you mean, mother? How can that be true? The elderly woman seated herself upon the wooden bench beside them, her movements slow and deliberate. She gazed at the ground for a moment, a long, thoughtful pause, then looked back up, addressing both of them. The gold did not literally transmute into pepper, my child, she explained, clarifying the mysterious event. That was merely the appearance it took to the one who reclaimed it. It was reclaimed, taken back, by the true possessor of that particular gold. Adwoa's eyes widened further in astonishment. What? I do not comprehend, mother. Who is the true possessor? The woman slowly inclined her head, a gesture of affirmation. That gold was not mine by right, Adwoa. I was merely safeguarding it, watching over it, for someone else. For a spirit, a guardian connected to that particular treasure. When Kofi took it, when he appropriated that which did not belong to him, the spirit came to reclaim its property. That is why he lost his sanity. It was the spirit's doing, a consequence of his theft. Kofi's hands commenced trembling again, this time from a deep, spiritual fear as the reality of his act and its consequence became clear. He looked down, overwhelmed by fear and shame. The woman then reached into her cloth wrapper, producing a small black bag she had been carrying. This, she declared, holding up the bag, is the gold, the very ingots Kofi took. It returned to me yesterday. I did not summon it. I did not seek it out. It simply materialized here in the compound, resting silently by my feet. Adwoa took a step back, a gasp escaping her lips, the reality of the supernatural element of the story washing over her. So everything he recounted, however strange, was true? Indeed, Adwoa, the elderly woman said, confirming the terrifying reality of spiritual justice. He was punished severely for appropriating that which did not belong to him, for taking the spirit's property. His suffering was a direct consequence of his greed and deception. But now the gold has returned to its rightful place, back under the spirit's guardianship, with me as its keeper. Kofi fell to his knees again, his face contorted with shame and remorse. I was unaware, mother, he stated, his voice choked with emotion. I believed it was merely wealth, earthly treasure to be taken. I did not understand its true nature. The woman regarded him, her eyes filled with ancient wisdom. Not everything that gleams like gold is yours to handle, my son, she said, her voice a gentle warning. Some things carry consequences far beyond their material value. Silence enveloped the place, the air feeling thick and oppressive with the weight of the revelation and Kofi's profound remorse. Kofi was still on his knees, his body trembling slightly, his eyes filled with deep shame and regret. He clasped his head with his hands, a gesture of genuine anguish and remorse. "Mother, I am truly remorseful," he said, his voice broken. "I was unaware of the truth. I beg your forgiveness for my actions. I shall never again commit such an act, never again take what is not rightfully mine. I have learned a terrible lesson." The elderly woman regarded him for an extended duration, seeing the sincerity in his eyes and posture. Then she said, her voice gentle but firm, summarizing the painful lesson, "Avarice, Kofi, brought this consequence upon you. The desire for more than you have, for what belongs to others, is a dangerous path. If something is not rightfully yours, if it was not given freely or earned honestly, leave it be. Be content with your own possessions, with what you have legitimately acquired. Do not permit your gaze, your covetous eyes, to guide your heart to dishonest actions." Kofi nodded quickly, absorbing her words, his lesson learned through immense suffering. "I comprehend now, mother. I truly comprehend." The woman then turned her attention to Adwoa, her countenance softer now, a gentle smile returning to her lips. She inquired, "The gold I bestowed upon you, Adwoa? Tomorrow marks the 7th day since I gave it to you, does it not?" Adwoa looked up, her face reflecting the journey she had been on. "Indeed, mother. Tomorrow marks exactly 7 days." The elderly woman smiled faintly, a look of approval on her face. "Good. You have waited patiently, as instructed. Do not delay unduly any longer. Go now and trade it, sell it as I permitted. Utilize the proceeds wisely, Adwoa. Employ it with a good heart and a clear mind to construct your existence, to build the better future you seek." That gold was intended for someone possessing a virtuous heart, someone who would act without expectation of reward, she explained, reiterating the source of Adwoa's blessing. "It found its way to you, not because you sought wealth, but because you assisted me freely, simply because it was the virtuous course of action." Adwoa's eyes filled with fresh tears, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude and understanding. "My deepest gratitude, mother. Thank you profoundly for your wisdom, your grace, and your incredible generosity." The woman slowly rose from the bench. "You may both depart now," she said, signifying the end of their time there. That which needed to be accomplished, the lesson that needed to be learned, and the grace that was offered, has been accomplished. Kofi bowed his head low in respect. "My gratitude, mother, for everything." Adwoa also stated, her voice filled with sincerity, "We are deeply grateful to you." They both exited the compound in silence, leaving the peaceful dwelling and the wise woman behind. No one uttered a word as they walked, but deep within their hearts, they both knew with absolute certainty that life would never again be the same for either of them. And so, this extraordinary narrative concluded. Adwoa received her recompense, her unexpected fortune, not because she sought wealth or personal gain, but because of the inherent benevolence of her heart, her willingness to act with selfless kindness. Kofi, on the other hand, learned through harsh, agonizing experience that when one appropriates that which does not rightfully belong to them, taking what is not given, it will never conclude favorably. There are consequences, seen and unseen. That which you pilfer, that which you take through greed or deceit, may appear appealing and desirable momentarily, offering a fleeting promise of wealth or power, yet ultimately it will bring only shame, profound suffering, and in his case, a terrifying descent into utter insanity orchestrated by forces beyond human understanding. The moral of this tale, illuminated by the events that transpired, is straightforward and timeless. Always strive to perform virtuous acts, small or large, even and especially when unobserved, for true character is revealed in the absence of scrutiny. Be content with your possessions, with what you have legitimately earned or been given. Avarice is a destructive force, capable of devastating a person's life and mind, but genuine benevolence holds the key to opening portals of opportunity and profound fulfillment that even the grandest material wealth cannot unlock.